London has always attracted money, but the most powerful fortunes here don't announce themselves. They move through beauty brands you recognize, fashion empires you wear, media stories you consume, and properties you'll never be invited into. And behind some of the most quietly influential of those fortunes are Black women whose wealth isn't obvious, but undeniable. In this video, we're counting down the richest Black women connected to London. Women best known for glamour, creativity, or controversy, but whose real power lives in ownership, equity, and long-term control. Some became famous first, then became wealthy. Some were wealthy long before their names meant anything to the public. And one reached a level where wealth doesn't expand anymore. It simply holds. This isn't about who made the most noise. It's about who made the smartest moves. Watch closely, because by the time we reach the final name, the story won't feel like a list. It'll feel like you've just been handed a map most people never see. Let's begin. Before billion-dollar empires take shape, modern wealth often begins quietly, from the ground up. Patricia Bright is where that shift becomes clear. At the heart of her rise was a choice that looked small but moved like a domino. She treated content creation as a business, not a lifestyle. Most people see Patricia Bright as a YouTuber or influencer. That's the visible outcome, but not the foundation. Before the spotlight, she worked in corporate finance. So when she entered the digital world, she didn't chase attention like a flicker of light. She understood cash flow, assets, and long-term strategy. As her audience expanded, her income followed. But instead of spending for appearance, she redirected earnings into ownership, like slowing a rushing river and storing its power. Over time, an online platform evolved into a personal net worth now estimated between £5 million and £10 million, built through property, equity, and ventures like The Break, not just brand deals. Patricia Bright represents a new wealth pathway, turning attention into assets. By moving early from income to ownership, she redefined success for digital creators, especially Black women in Britain. Rather than remaining at the mercy of algorithms, she built insulation through businesses and real estate that outlast trends. Her story raises the bar for those who follow. Popularity alone is no longer enough. Financial literacy, asset building, and foresight now matter. Patricia's wealth challenges the idea that influencer income is fragile, because she transformed it into something durable. Her significance isn't about being the richest, it's about timing. She didn't mistake visibility for permanence or wait for income to fade before thinking about security. A £5 to £10 million net worth may not rival oil dynasties or fashion empires, but it represents something just as powerful: control over income, property, and narrative. That's why Patricia Bright belongs here. Not for how loudly her wealth is shown, but for how quietly it was built. Not all wealth in London is built online or in public. Some of it comes from understanding how money moves, long before the cameras ever turn on. That brings us to Gina Miller. Most people know her through courtrooms and headline-grabbing confrontations with the British government. But that's the visible chapter, not the beginning. Long before the lawsuits, Gina Miller built her foundation inside London's investment and asset management world, gaining quiet exposure to how capital is allocated, protected, and grown within one of the world's most complex financial systems. Her personal net worth, estimated between £1 million and £5 million, was never designed to impress. It was engineered for self-sufficiency. Property, investments, and long-term planning came first. Visibility followed later, almost by accident. That foundation made everything else possible. Gina Miller's wealth wasn't meant to be admired. It was meant to function. Taking on the UK government requires more than legal knowledge. It requires insulation, the ability to act without donors, political parties, or corporate backers. Her private wealth gave her that independence, like armor worn beneath everyday clothes. That level of autonomy disrupts systems. It removes leverage. When approval isn't needed and survival isn't at stake, power structures lose control over pressure and outcomes. In London, where influence is often tied to dependence, that kind of freedom is destabilizing. Gina Miller belongs on this list not because of the size of her fortune, but because of how deliberately it was built. A £1 to £5 million net worth may not make headlines, but it does something more powerful. It removes fear. Her wealth isn't decorative, it's protective. And in a city like London, wealth that protects agency often carries more power than wealth that seeks attention. If Gina Miller shows how financial independence can challenge power from the outside, the next story moves in the opposite direction. Because some wealth isn't built through confrontation at all. It's built through endurance, survival, and learning how to last inside a system designed to replace you. This is where Naomi Campbell enters. Fashion made Naomi visible. But visibility isn't what made her wealthy. She entered the modeling industry when Black women were treated as rare exceptions, seen but disposable. Careers were brief, security almost non-existent. Models earned quickly and vanished, like names blurred at the end of a runway show. Naomi refused that fate. Instead of treating modeling as a peak, she treated it as a doorway. As her fame grew, she invested in longevity, relationships, influence, and positioning herself not just as talent, but as presence. Like a pillar rather than a passing trend, she made herself structural. That decision set off a slow, compounding effect. Runway success turned into a personal net worth now estimated between £60 and £80 million. Not because she was paid the most, but because she lasted the longest. By remaining relevant across decades, Naomi transformed cultural capital into advisory roles, brand equity, private investments, and property. She shifted from being chosen to being consulted, and that shift changed everything. In an industry obsessed with youth, her longevity pressured fashion to recognize long-term contributors as assets, not placeholders. It proved that influence, when protected, can keep generating value long after the spotlight dims. In London, a city that rewards endurance and relationships, this kind of staying power becomes financial stability. Naomi Campbell's wealth isn't remarkable for its speed, but for its survival. She didn't disappear when trends moved on. She didn't rely solely on youth. She placed herself where decisions were made. A £60 to £80 million net worth may not rival billion-dollar fortunes, but in an industry designed to discard women quickly, Naomi's success is structural. Her story reveals a deeper truth. Sometimes power isn't about breaking into a system. It's about staying long enough to bend it. The next story steps away from visibility altogether. Because some wealth isn't built in front of audiences, it's built behind the scenes by controlling content, distribution, and demand. That shift brings us to Mo Abudu. Long before African stories had guaranteed global traction, before Netflix deals and international premieres, Mo Abudu was building audiences, not hype. She understood a quiet rule of media power. Content only becomes valuable when it travels. Mo didn't come to London to be discovered. She arrived with proof of demand already in hand. By the time Ebony Life expanded into the UK, she had built a catalog, relationships, and leverage. London didn't give her creativity, it gave her scale. That choice triggered everything that followed. Instead of licensing stories cheaply, she positioned herself as an owner. Instead of selling concepts, she built pipelines. Like anchoring a ship rather than renting passage, Mo ensured long-term control. Over time, this strategy translated into a personal fortune now estimated between £100 and £300 million, driven by production rights, ownership stakes, and long-term licensing. What's often missed is this: Mo Abudu's wealth isn't just media money, it's structural money. By anchoring her business in London, she placed African storytelling inside the global content economy on her own terms. London became a strategic hub, not a cultural filter. That single decision reshaped who finances African narratives, who owns the intellectual property, and where the profits ultimately land. Instead of stories flowing outward through Western ownership, Mo reversed the direction. The result is quiet, but consequential. African-led media no longer needs validation to scale. only infrastructure. Mo Abudu is one of the most strategically positioned figures on this list. Her net worth alone doesn't capture her real power. Because in media, influence isn't measured by what you earn, it's measured by what you own and how long you control it. She didn't chase global platforms, she negotiated with them. And by doing so from London, she locked future value into her ecosystem, not someone else's balance sheet. Her wealth isn't loud, it's embedded. And in a city built on quiet control, that makes Mo Abudu one of the most consequential figures in this entire ranking. Some fortunes tied to London aren't built on attention at all. They're built on systems. Quiet machinery that moves money for everyone else. That brings us to Valerie Moran. She stepped into a world most people never see. Fintech doesn't trend. It doesn't create celebrities. And it rarely explains itself. Valerie Moran began not with hype, but with function. She co-founded a payments company at a time when digital transactions were fragile, over-regulated, and widely mistrusted. This wasn't flashy, consumer-facing innovation. It was back-end infrastructure, the kind of technology that only works if banks, regulators, and governments allow it to exist. While others built products that looked impressive, Valerie built systems that had to work every time. That patience set off a quiet, chain reaction. The technology scaled invisibly, embedding itself into daily financial movement like wiring behind a wall. When the company was eventually sold, years of disciplined execution translated into a personal fortune now estimated at over £200 million, making Valerie Moran the first black woman to appear on the Sunday Times Rich list. Her risk wasn't just financial, it was regulatory. Fintech lives under constant pressure from compliance, legislation, and institutional resistance. Valerie wasn't building for a fast exit. She was building for trust. And trust, in finance, compounds slowly. That success shifted the system. By breaking through a highly regulated space, she widened the doorway for other founders, especially women and people of color, long excluded from capital-intensive industries. Her win didn't just create wealth, it reshaped who investors and regulators were willing to back next. In London, where credibility often outweighs charisma, this kind of execution unlocks elite outcomes. Valerie Moran represents one of the purest forms of wealth on this list. No personal brand, no cultural currency, no media amplification, just disciplined building and a well-timed exit. A £200 million plus net worth isn't earned by being noticed. It's earned by being reliable at scale. And in London's financial ecosystem, reliability is often the most valuable asset of all. Next comes Emma Grede. Emma didn't enter fashion as a face or a celebrity accessory. She entered as a systems thinker. Raised in East London, she learned early that in fashion, the real money isn't made on runways. It's made in supply chains, margins, and ownership, long before branding enters the room. Most people associate Emma Grede with high-profile collaborations and celebrity-backed brands. That's the outcome, not the foundation. Behind the scenes, she positioned herself not as talent, but as equity. Instead of chasing trends, she took ownership stakes in brands built to scale globally, turning partnerships into power. That strategy compounded quietly. Over time, those equity positions formed a personal net worth now estimated between £300 and £400 million, anchored in some of the fastest-growing consumer brands in the world. What often goes unspoken is this: Emma Grede's wealth isn't built on popularity, it's built on architecture. By prioritizing structure over spotlight, she proved you don't need to be visible to control value. You need access to manufacturing, distribution, and ownership at scale. In London's financial ecosystem, this kind of strategic invisibility is where the biggest fortunes often form, like load-bearing beams hidden behind polished walls. Here, the pattern shifts again, toward governance, global assets, and the power to define standards themselves. This is Dame Pat McGrath. Pat McGrath entered fashion as a creative authority, not a mogul. For decades, she worked behind the scenes, shaping the visual language of the world's most powerful fashion houses. She was respected, revered even, but not wealthy by industry standards. Most creatives stop there. Pat didn't. The turning point came when she made a decisive move. Instead of lending her vision to other brands, she built her own. When Pat McGrath Labs launched, it didn't sell novelty, it sold credibility, earned over years at the highest level of fashion. That decision sparked a chain reaction. Luxury retailers followed. Fashion houses endorsed. Investors validated. The brand reached unicorn status, and Pat's personal fortune grew to an estimated 500 to 700 million pounds, placing her among the wealthiest women in global beauty. What truly sets her apart is this: Pat McGrath didn't just monetize creativity, she reversed the power dynamic. For decades, creatives shaped billion-dollar aesthetics while remaining service providers. Pat moved upstream, claiming ownership over products, influence, and ultimately, standards of beauty themselves. In London, where authority carries weight, her reputation converted directly into equity. Pat McGrath didn't chase relevance. She defined it, then owned it. And in any financial capital, ownership over standards is one of the most powerful forms of wealth there is. While some fortunes use London as a safe harbor, this story shows how it can also be a launchpad. Isabel dos Santos was once called Africa's first female billionaire. Her wealth didn't come from public entrepreneurship, but from proximity to political power in Angola, where state assets, private enterprise, and governance were tightly intertwined. The headlines focus on the billion-dollar figure, but the real story is where that money moved. As her fortune expanded, London became a destination for positioning capital. Property, legal structures, and financial vehicles were used to anchor wealth internationally. At its peak, her assets, spanning telecoms, banking, and energy, were valued at over $1 billion, with London playing a quiet role in preservation. This isn't just a story of accumulation. It's a case study in capital mobility. When political conditions shift, money moves like water under pressure, seeking stability, complexity, and time. London has long offered all three. Her case exposes how wealth can travel faster than regulation, forcing difficult questions about transparency and the global competition between financial centers. Isabel dos Santos belongs here not as a symbol of success, but as a lesson in how global wealth behaves under stress. This isn't a morality tale, it's an architectural one, and it helps explain why London remains central to the global wealth map, not just for growth, but for protection. At this point, the conversation shifts. Everything so far speaks to serious wealth, but what comes next operates on a different altitude. This is the top tier. At number 2, Rihanna. Her name surprises some people, mainly because she isn't British. But this isn't a passport list. It's a map of wealth connected to London, of fortunes built, scaled, or structured through the city's financial, legal, and luxury systems. Rihanna entered the world through music. But music wasn't the engine of her wealth. It was the signal. The real turning point came when she stopped licensing her image and started owning the machinery behind her brands. Popularity became equity. Attention became infrastructure. During a period when she lived and operated out of London, her brand operations plugged directly into the city's global capital and luxury networks. What followed was decisive. A personal fortune now estimated between $1.0 and $1.4 billion, driven primarily by Fenty Beauty and Savage X Fenty, with music as a legacy asset rather than the core. She didn't become a billionaire by being famous. She became one by converting fame into ownership. That meant equity partnerships, control over product development, and alignment with manufacturing and distribution built for global scale, the kind of systems London quietly specializes in. This shift didn't just change her balance sheet, it changed the model. Celebrity brands stopped being endorsements and became operating companies. Founders demanded governance, cap tables, and long-term control. And London became one of the places where those rights were structured, protected, and expanded across borders. Rihanna's wealth isn't celebrity wealth, it's industrial. She crossed from performer to platform owner, from being the product to owning the system that delivers it. A billion-dollar fortune built on equity behaves differently. It compounds, it survives trend cycles, and it earns access to rooms where companies are financed and acquired. So no, she isn't British. But London is part of her wealth architecture, and that's why she stands near the top of this list. Not because of fame, but because of how the machine was built. This is where the conversation ends, and the hierarchy sharpens. The final name on this list isn't chasing scale, she's setting terms. Folorunsho Alakija. To understand why she stands at the top, we have to start far from London, in Nigeria's oil sector. Her fortune was built in resources, not trends. And resource wealth behaves differently. It grows slower, lasts longer, and is designed to survive political and market turbulence. London enters her story not as a stage, but as a vault. Over time, Alakia positioned major assets in the city, including multiple properties in One Hyde Park, among the most expensive real estate in the world, and high-value holdings in Hampstead. These weren't lifestyle choices, they were strategic anchors, like steel weights holding capital in place. Today, her net worth is estimated between $1.5 and $2.5 billion, making her not only the wealthiest on this list, but the most insulated. At this level, wealth stops chasing opportunity and starts prioritizing stability, jurisdiction, and protection. London's prime real estate market functions as a safe harbor for global capital seeking rule of law security and long-term value. Assets like these aren't flipped, they're held, leveraged, and passed forward. Alakija isn't using London to grow her fortune, she's using it to lock it in. Her position at number 1 isn't about size, it's about finality. Her wealth doesn't depend on relevance, attention, or market sentiment. A $1.5 to $2.5 billion fortune built on resource control and preserved through global real estate represents the highest form of financial power, independence from cycles. While others are still scaling or negotiating, Alakija is consolidating. That's the clearest signal of all. She didn't need London to become wealthy. She chose it because wealth of this kind demands protection, not validation. And that's why this list ends here. As this list comes to a close, one thing should be clear. Wealth doesn't look the same when you trace it properly. What you've just seen isn't a parade of luxury. It's a blueprint of power. Some of these women built in public, others in silence. Some turned culture into capital. Others turned systems into shields. But every fortune here was shaped by intention, not accident. London, in this story, is not the destination. It's the instrument, a city where wealth is scaled, structured, preserved, and, at the highest levels, insulated. For some, it was a launchpad. For others, a vault. And for a few, a place where power could be quietly locked into place, like a signature etched into stone. These women didn't just succeed inside existing rules. Many of them rewrote what success could look like by owning instead of endorsing, lasting instead of peaking, and thinking in generations instead of moments. And that's the part most people miss. True wealth doesn't announce itself. It compounds, it positions, it waits. So if this video shifted how you think about money, influence, or visibility, let it. If it challenged the stories you've been told about who holds power in cities like London, even better. Because this wasn't just a ranking, it was a lens. And now that you've seen how the game is really played, the question is no longer who's rich, it's who's in control. I'll see you next time.